Thank you, Bill. And yes, they do have a patch for that. This says Chief Scout Executive Retired. Wayne Brock made sure that I had a supply of those before I left Dallas a few weeks ago. What a pleasure it is to be back in southwestern Pennsylvania. What a thrill to be back in Beaver County. And you know what a joy it was. The greatest thrill I had for the 7 years that I lived in wonderful Big D was being a Steeler fan in cowboy country. I was the most hated man in the Metroplex. It was awesome. Everybody knew. As a matter of fact, on my last day in the national office, they had a little party. They were celebrating the fact that I was leaving. And all the national, there was about 400 people in the big room downstairs, and we had cookies and punch and all of that. And then I went up to my office to grab my last little bit of goodies, and as I'm coming down the elevator and go out, the entire national staff is lined up out the front doors. If any of you have been there, out that walkway that goes all the way out to the parking lot, the entire staff, all with terrible towels. It was a real thrill. I'm also honored to be back here because of the work you're doing as a council and as the adjoining councils. I include all of you in this part of the world. But I know most about what's now, it's hard for me to say Laurel Highlands Council. I'll get used to it, I'm sure. But the work that you're doing here, the innovative, creative work that you're doing is very, very important. And, you know, trying to figure out what are you going to say. It's like preaching to the choir. And, you know, you're all friends, and you know, I recognize a whole lot of faces in the room. How do I spend the next few minutes sharing with you? And I thought, you know, I only know one way to do it, and that's kind of just speak from the heart. And if I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about, first of all, this whole journey to excellence thing, and I want to put a capstone on what Jamie said and what Mike said. People have asked me many, many times, what do you think your legacy will be? What do you want your legacy to be? And everybody's, oh, the summit and all of that. And that's all well and good. That's sort of a little iconic thing. But I'm most proud of the fact that across this great country, we've changed the dialogue about what's important. We've changed the dialogue about professionals and volunteers and their relationships and how we come together as a team to fulfill the mission of the main thing. And most importantly, we've changed the dialogue on the whole notion of membership. I mean, all of us have come through a period of time when the most important thing in any district or any council was the bottom right-hand corner of that membership report every Friday. Very little conversation has ever been during those decades of that was ever talked about the experience that those numbers were getting, but rather how many can you get by next Friday. And you know, we rewarded the numbers rather than the outcomes, and Jamie talked about that a little bit. So I'm most proud about changing that dialogue a little bit, and I would ask you to embrace this journey to excellence in a way that helps you understand that every one of those elements are designed to increase the quality of the experience that every single scout gets. And yes, it's important that we serve more because, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it's important that we serve more, that we're growing and continuing to grow, but in a way that enhances the experience of each individual child. It's critically important that we do that. So I'm proud of the journey to excellence. I'm proud of the work that Jamie and the whole team in Dallas has done in putting this together. And I urge you to embrace it. This is not another iteration of a quality recognition award. This truly is about continuous improvement. You know, the cool thing about it is you can be gold this year, but guess what? You know what gold's based on? The top 10% that year. So that needle keeps moving. If we all get better, that becomes a goal we chase, you know, an aspirational thing as opposed to another sticker on a plaque. So please embrace it. Now let's talk a little bit about, if we could, you know, my personal experience over the last 4 or 5 years and what I've come to realize in the course of my tenure as a Chief Scout Executive. First of all, if we go back to a few years ago, we celebrated a milestone, didn't we? What was that?
100th
anniversary. The 100th anniversary of the Boy Scouts of America. Think about that. And the honor it was to be the Chief Scout Executive at this incredible crossroads in our history, this incredible period of time. And we had an option there. We had some choices to make as we were approaching the looming 100th anniversary. First of all, we were going to get there. We couldn't kill it with a stick. We would become 100 years whether we liked it or not. So we couldn't mess it up. It was too close. We were going to get there. So what are we going to do about it when we get there? And we had the option, of course, of baking the big birthday cake in the obligatory black tie gala in D.C. or somewhere and stand around singing happy birthday and telling stories about the good old days. Or we had the opportunity to use this as a reason to do some things that we felt were critically important to do. First of all, I felt it was important that we use this year-long celebration to reintroduce scouting to the American people. You see, because for far too long, for well over a decade, about a decade and a half, we had been playing defense. We've been hunkered down, we've been hiding, been hollering incoming and allowing other people to define us, allowing ourselves to be co-opted for other people's agenda. And I got sick and tired of meeting people who saw the lapel pin and said, "Oh, you're with the Scouts. Are they still around?" How sad is that? The largest force for good in the history of mankind, the largest youth movement in America. And John Q. Public has to ask if we're still around because we quit telling our story. You see, the quickest way, the easiest way to not answer the tough question is to put yourself in a situation where you don't have to answer any questions. And so we went silent. We took the high road. And I said to our national board, I said, guys, that's got to stop. We have such a wonderful story to tell. We have a great opportunity to begin the telling of it. Let's take advantage of this and reintroduce scouting to the American people. So we did that through a year-long purpose-driven, starting with the Tournament of Roses Parade. First time since 1960 there was a Boy Scout float in the Tournament of Roses Parade. All back and forth across the country, every council in America had wonderful, exciting things. I think I came to something here, didn't I, Mike? I don't recall, but anyway, ending up with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York in November, with that iconic Centennial Jamboree at Fort A.P. Hill as a capstone to this great adventure. And in the process, we began a dialogue with the American people about this great thing called scouting. We've also gone into some of the things you've experienced today, a process of kind of reinventing ourselves in the way that we do business. You know, I said from the first day as the chief scout, well, I've said it for many years, but I had an opportunity to do something about it. The first day I became chief, I said the national organization exists for only two reasons, and two reasons only. One is to preserve, protect, and enhance the brand, because as the brand gets more iconic, all the boats rise. And the other is to help a local council succeed, because you see, scouting is local, all scouting is local. The National Council of the Boy Scouts of America owns one unit. And up until September 1st, I was the chartered organization rep for that unit. It's a venture crew for the employees' children in the National Council. All other scouting is local, and so everything we're doing on a national level needs to be focused on how do we help a local council, and by default, a district, because in reality, it's the unit that has to succeed for scouting to succeed. And so we began a process of reinvention in that regard, and that was kind of fun. We burned a lot of calories. We hired, what's that big consulting firm? Shoot, just drawing a blank. McKinsey. We hired McKinsey to come and help us reinvent ourselves. That was great. It was a great organization. Then we have a wonderful board member from Southern California who is the principal in a company called Insignium, and their claim to fame is they come along and clean up the mess that McKinsey made, and he volunteered his services to come in and help us out. And if any of you have ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, we moved a lot of cheese. But we had a lot of fun doing that, and I think we're getting better at it. I think we're getting some traction with the notion that we can be nimbler and more proactive in our approach. But why did we do all that? Because we could? We burned a lot of calories, went through a ton of resources, made a lot of people uncomfortable. That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, in my humble opinion, and now I can say it without being paid to say it, what you do, what we do together, has never in our history been more important than it is today. Never in the history of this great nation has what you do, we do together, been more important than it is today. We're on such a slippery slope as a people. It is so frightening. When you look around us at the dearth of leadership with integrity, when you look around us at the crisis that not only young people, but we as a people are in, it's never been more important. When Dr. Richard Carmona was our Surgeon General, some of you may have heard me say this in other venues and contexts, but it's really critically important. When he was our Surgeon General, by the way, there's a great story, success story. Hispanic, ghetto, gang, Navy, went to the Navy, became the Surgeon General of the United States, only in America. What a great story, what a great man. But Dr. Richard Carmona was our Surgeon General. He testified before Congress, a committee on Congress, on the state of the health of children in America. And one of my colleagues invited me to read this testimony. And I did, I went and looked it up. And he said so many things that are above my pay grade. He's a doctor, I didn't understand a lot of what he said. But he said one thing that absolutely grabbed me by the throat. When he said to this committee of Congress that in his opinion, we as a people are on the verge of the first generation in our history, the first generation in our history that's likely to be less healthy and live fewer years than their parents. Think about that. What kind of an aspiration is that? If Dr. Carmona's prophecy is true, and we truly do have to face with the first generation in our history that's likely to be less healthy and live fewer years than our parents, what does that mean for us? Not just for the Boy Scouts. How many of you are in business? Have your own business, or in the business of hiring people, putting people to work? If what Dr. Carmona says is true, where are we going to find the healthy workforce that's going to come to work every day, give you a day's work for a day's pay, and help us be competitive in this global world that we live in, if Dr. Carmona is true? Who's going to pay for the health costs? We can't figure out how to pay for what we've got now. If what he says is true, who's going to pay for the health costs? Because of the sedentary lifestyle of young people today, we're faced with a crisis. You know, one of the things that was so, you guys will find this to be oxymoronic, but one of the greatest joys and privileges that I had as the Chief Scout Executive was to travel. I spent over 200 nights a year, each year for 5 years in a hotel somewhere. And I get to travel through some of America's great airports. Now that's the oxymoron part. But you know, one of the biggest thrills for me at all the major airports in America, I don't care whether it's LaGuardia or DFW or San Francisco or Chicago, Cincinnati, it doesn't matter. To come off the plane onto the jetway and go one way or the other on the concourse and see all of these wonderful young men and women, American boys and girls in their BDUs, coming home from or on their way to deployment to defend those freedoms that we take so for granted. Marvelous scene. If what Dr. Carmona says is true, where are we going to find those young people? Scouting is one of the last places left where in a relatively unstructured way you can play steal the bacon, get out there and climb and sweat and be a boy. And learn that to climb the mountain it's even more fun to reach back and bring somebody with you because it's better for the patrol to get to the top than you to get there by yourself. We're one of the last places left where we can sit in the front row and be obnoxious in every community in America and be part of the solution in the health. When the mayor of Take Any City, USA wakes up in the morning in a cold sweat because he had a dream or she had a dream about the plight of children in their town, I want them to think about the Boy Scouts as a solution. That's not part of the case because we haven't been part of the dialogue for over a decade. We need to insinuate ourselves in that. We have 292 Boy Scout councils and 983 camps. Now how ludicrous is that? What are we doing with all of these properties? Why aren't we taking every kid we can get our hands on, scout or not, and say, come with me, we're going to teach you about the excitement of the good outdoors, and in the process, some of those kids are going to want to be scouts. So if Dr. Carmona's prophecy is true, we have a lot of work to do, and a major role to play in this crisis in America. The STEM initiative that we've launched in partnership with ExxonMobil. Do you realize that American students, young people, are 32nd in the world in math skills? Worse than that in science? We like to look ourselves in the mirror and claim supremacy in all of these wonders. We are nowhere near supreme, and we're losing fast. That's a crisis. You see, because if we want to be the moral compass of the world, we have to have a supreme place in the economic pecking order as well, or we become irrelevant. What are we doing about that? We're doing robotics merit badge. We're doing all kinds of things to help kids get excited about this notion of science, technology, engineering, and math. But all of us here who do this every day have to embrace those and understand how important that work is. You know, it's not just going camping in the woods. It's embracing the notion that we are part of the solution to a country that's in trouble. We may be the last man standing in many, many ways. And you know, let me wrap it up by the notion that I've come to believe fully and deeply. But in fact, nothing, not a single thing, defines a scout or a scouter better, or more appropriately, than those 12 magic words of the scout law. The scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly,
courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Nothing defines a scout or a scouter better. As a matter of fact, there's no higher form of compliment than to have someone come up to you and say, "You're such a Boy Scout." You're darn right, and I'm proud of it. Nothing defines us better than that in the 40 words of the Scout Law. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never met a single person in my life who got up in the morning and said, "You know what, today's Saturday. This is my day to be disloyal. Or by golly, I'm going to be a coward today because I can. Or I think I'll be irreverent." You see, nobody sets out to embrace these things we would kind of consider character flaws. Nobody. But it's like anything else. Anything else in the human experience, to get good at something, what do you have to do?
Practice.
Practice, right? Now for me, all that works except for golf. Which is the exception that proves the rule, so it is a valid rule. To get good at anything, you have to practice. So what happens? Tuesday night, church basement, Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, my hometown. Little Johnny shows up for his first troop meeting. Just crossed over, 11 years old. Probably didn't get his arrow of light, or this wouldn't work, this next example, but here's what happens. He shows up, joins the troop for the first time, they go into the basement of the church, and some 13-year-old big boy takes him over in the corner and says, "Now, you got to memorize these words." What do you mean memorize these words? It's not school. I came to climb them out. Just trust me, it'll be important. Memorize these words. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful. On my honor, I'll do my best to do my duty. God, my okay, he says in the corner. Yeah. A couple weeks later, he's got them down pretty good. He can say them. Has no clue what they mean. Until next Saturday. The troop gathers up in the church parking lot. Scoutmaster or Cubmaster passes out the little bags, and off they go into the neighborhoods putting out scouting for food bags. "See you next week, Mrs. Jones." Sure enough, next week comes around. Same neighborhood, same kids, they go out and they pick up these bags of food. And then they go to the food bank, the little local food cupboard. And they present the food and they see the eyes, and they see the gratitude in the hearts of those volunteer workers working in that food bank, and they begin to feel, literally feel, not just understand or memorize, but feel what it feels like to help other people. And you do that enough, and you do that enough, and you do that enough, it becomes part of your DNA. It's sort of who you are. It's sort of what forms you. It's not theoretical anymore. You feel it. You understand it. Okay, then a year later, here comes Johnny, and he shows up, and all of a sudden he gets elected the patrol leader of the Covert Patrol. Ay, ay, ay. Uh-oh, now what? 7 other guys are depending on me to make good decisions. 7 other guys are looking at me to pick the train. And he begins his first real experience with understanding leadership. He gets to begin his first experience with understanding what servant leadership means. And he begins to learn that sometimes you fail at leadership. And we create that safe environment for him to learn by those failures and continue on this wonderful journey that he started for himself. So then he becomes scribe, quartermaster, assistant senior patrol leader. And one day now the whole troop is looking at him. And guess what? That leadership gene is now part of his DNA. And I don't care if he becomes the president of the United States or the postmaster in your town or the guy who picks up your trash. He'll do it with honor and integrity because his DNA has been changed by the Boy Scouts of America. And wouldn't this be a better place if more DNA was embedded with the notion of trustworthy is a good thing and loyal is a good thing? And you know, when he goes to that camporee that you're doing in a much grander scale here, and shows up for the big weekend, and several thousand other kids show up. And they go through all their stuff, and then on Sunday morning, they go to a Scouts own service on the top of the hill as the sun's coming up. Somebody's leading him through an exercise of reverence. That young man's belief and faith in his God will certainly become stronger. But as he looks around him, his belief and respect for the faith of others become strong as well, because there are Jewish boys and Muslim boys and Protestant boys and Catholic boys. And that becomes part of his DNA as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the work that you do is God's work. And you may be frustrated with the size of the patch or the color of the hat, or sometimes the computer doesn't work. None of that matters. Because on Tuesday night, you're going to reach out and take the hand of a boy and help him become the kind of man this nation desperately needs. Thank you.